Welcome. So we're going to talk about the future of European new space after 2030. After the emergence of an impressive number of new players, these companies are reaching a stage of maturity where they now need to make money and produce. Consolidations appear to be a necessary step. And to discuss this topic, I have four guests with me. Please welcome Xavier Hierro, Commercial Director of Pangea Propulsion, Sébastien Lombard, Head of Prospective at CNES, Olivier PIEPSZ, President of Prométhée, and Cassie Welling, Chief Operating Officer at Constellar. So firstly, Sébastien Lombard, what is your point of view on the evolution of European new space? Are we reaching a necessary consolidation step?
Okay, thank you for the invitation. Good afternoon. The first remark, so excuse me for this first remark, but the new space is not fully new. No more today, in fact. One should know and remember that some of the companies in the new space, the European new space and the French new space today, are 10 years old, in fact. Around the table, we have younger companies, I think, but there is a first generation of companies in the new space that are 10 years old. At the same time, we have brand new companies. I was a few weeks ago at the Assise du New Space, and there were brand new companies at this event. Actually, they had just printed the kakemono the day before. So. A new space logic that is fully alive with brand new players, but a diversified ecosystem of companies flagged new space that are at different steps of their development. And for the oldest company in the new space, of course, they have 10 years of life behind them. Between 2002 and 2012, SpaceX was created. It developed Falcon 1, it developed Falcon 9, and it performed the first launch of a Dragon capsule, first operational launch to the ISS. So in 10 years, you can prove many things. So for these companies with a significant life behind them, it's time to prove what they can bring to the sector. Some of them experience significant progress or success, and it's time for them to decide the strategy. Should they grow, try to raise a higher level of funding? And some of them experience difficulties, technological difficulties, funding difficulties, and it's time to think about the future. Should they stop? Should they try another market segment in the space sector? So that's the first point. Some companies are at a point where consolidation is possible by acquisition of other companies if they are very successful, or they can run out of money in the coming years, and it's failure. Second point, the expectation of the investor, of the private investors, and of the governments are now higher, because there are many competitors, many players in the new space. More players, far more players than 10 years ago. And of course, investors are more selective in the funding of companies. And of course, companies that are now well advanced require high level of funding, and that's difficult to have this funding, especially in Europe. Third point, the consolidation is not specific to the new space. As you heard this morning, there are discussions about the consolidation between big industrial players at national level, at European level. It's kind of a protective action against the competition with with Chinese or American players on space data, on access to space transportation. And today, these actions, these consolidations, can also be useful to protect our space sector, to make more robust champions that can resist this competition with the US.
Cassie Wooding. Constellar is a German startup launched in 2020 with the ambition of deploying a constellation of thermal infrared satellites to capture data beyond the visible spectrum in order to decipher urban heat islands, improve irrigation, and even provide military surveillance. What is your view on this consolidation of Newspace?
Yeah, thank you. And I second what you've said. We're part of an ecosystem, all of us, and it's very natural that you have newcomers, you have old players, you have incumbents, you have disruptors. And I see that the Newspace part of that is just a natural process. So we're actually bringing in new ideas, new business models, disrupting new technologies. And maybe there's some churn, maybe some companies work out, some companies don't. So I think we mustn't forget that when we're thinking about consolidation, because consolidation is absolutely a natural process of industrial development. New business, old business, coming together, not coming together, competition, et cetera, but I think one of the important things, particularly for us, Constellar, as a small player, in this sector, growing, looking to develop, building a constellation. So we've launched 2 satellites, but we'd like to launch 30+ satellites. We would like to become a credible challenger to, for example, the US. And I think the consolidation of the market allows for that kind of activity. We can really genuinely bring new capabilities to the fore and consolidate and bring capabilities together that we haven't been able to do before in Europe. I think another chance is the ability to actually scale industrially. So how can we as Constellar work with other providers who have a similar mindset in terms of risk sharing, in terms of budget availability, in terms of timescales, to actually work together to industrialize quicker, faster, and also verticalize in technologies where we can really see an end-to-end value for Europe, for our nation states. I think the whole idea of delivery capabilities can be enhanced when working together. Of course, collaboration always is the sum of 2 parts. And more importantly, and I think this is again where the Newspace sector has a real advantage, is that we're born from finding a gap, finding a niche, and being able to develop a technology that's relevant for a market. So we're really looking for the business case here. We're pushing forwards more quickly to actually serve a need, a business need, and a commercial drive. So I hope that's what the consolidation of the market will go towards.
Olivier PIEPSZ, you are the CEO of Prométhée, which is developing a high-resolution Earth observation constellation, but you are also Vice President of the MEDEF Task Force on Newspace and Vice President of the Starter Office at GIFAS. What do you agree with the analysis? Is it a natural process, consolidation?
First, I believe that it's excellent news that in Europe we have a wide range of Newspace company bringing disruptive innovation. In 5, 6, maybe 10 years, Europe developed that. That's a great idea. We cannot forget that in general we are a little bit behind the US. We talk for constellation about 5 years behind, and don't forget China. I would say, and I very often use the images of trees. France, Europe invest to build this company. Private investors put also money on the table, take risk. And now we have nice little trees with very nice flowers. But the question is reach fruit, the market. And the danger is always to say we kept the delivery of the water supply before to get the fruits. Look, I think that France got an answer. We talk about this kind of organization, Alliance Newspace, Starter, which was founded by GIFAS with a big aerospace French organization, and then even the MEDEF decide to build a task force, which means that for all these organizations, support and help the new space is important as in source of revenue for the country and for the continent. What I think is after that, you realize that the key issue to build this kind of people is to bring coherences. In fact, to have one message, because if you talk to the national government, the agency, French agency, Commission, ESA, as much as we have a common message, and the idea is share a vision and build a policy, more efficient we will be. And have a vision and an industrial policy, it's not, it's really try to build a vision and try to integrate all the players to this vision and not sum all the vision of all the players, because if we do that, we build something which is not usable. Again, I believe that consolidation is not disintegration. The consolidation is done by the market. The market finally will decide who survives and who is not surviving. And again, if you have lack of budget, if the context is difficult, the danger is to say, okay, the solution, we have no more money, then, okay, consolidation. I think consolidation is really, will appear, but we have to do that. And the external player have to help and see how to do that. It must not be the easy solution of a lack of budget. I will finish by, I think, 3 key elements. We have to do defragmentation, that we work with CNES, which work with ESA, with the Commission, work together. If we have to see all the people and all the people has a different agenda, it won't work. Donc, point 1. The second point, don't forget about sovereignty. We talk today a lot about sovereignty, European, and try to get a European market and to get some European preference. Because sovereignty, if you say, okay, it's European, but you have a big piece of your system, of your investors, of I don't know, which is not European, sovereignty is finally one. So it's an important point, and we need to get European preference. And the third point, I think it's maybe, I think the opportunity of security. When I talk about security, it's defense, armed force, we talk about it, but also protection of key, very important buildings and infrastructure in a country, and then everything linked to environments. And I believe that's really a way where big company, historic player, and new space has to work together, but we need everyone to solve the next challenge. Security is really an opportunity for all of us where we can work together.
Xavier, Hierro, Pangea is a startup located between Barcelona and Toulouse, with the ambition of becoming the leading European engine manufacturer in the aerospace sector. What is your perspective on this topic?
Yes, thank you. First, I really join what Olivier just said. I think that there is an enormous fragmentation at European level, and I think that this is one of the elements that hinder our capacity to be competitive globally. And I see this fragmentation in terms of programs and in terms of companies, and it makes sense because at the end of the day, Europe and ESA is a conglomerate of different countries with different interests, willing to push their own agenda, as you're saying. But I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, probably the European Space Agency, and with the help or the lead of the European Commission, should be able to take harsher decisions. Why? Because we're talking about market, but this market is a bit different than other markets, and even more in the very upstream market, which we are in terms of propulsion and launchers, in which politicians have a big saying. And what I feel right now is that all the different national interests are being put ahead, and that difficult decisions are not being made. So there is a dissemination of the resources that we have in Europe that are not the same that they have in the US or China, I believe. So I think that it's time in the next, probably in the next ministerial, to take some harsh decision that will mean winners and losers. And on the other side of the table, there are the companies. I really don't like this comparison between old space and new space, because at the end of the day, something that goes to space has to pass through very high level of well, very demanding process of quality and so on. And I think that for sure what we heard this morning with the potential merge or consolidation of very big actors will also be applied in potentially smaller actors in the value chain. So this is something that will come in the years will arrive in the years to come. And last but not least, I want to cite an example, which is Astra in the US. Astra, which it's a company that did a SPAC and had a valuation, I don't know the exact figures, but the last valuation was 20 million. 20 million is not even the price of the assets that they own. And this is very, very important, and this will happen in Europe in the years to come as well. So a lot of actors are also thinking, okay, what do I do? Do I buy at the price that is right now the price? Do I wait for this valuation to go down and actually buy at very, very, very low cost? So all these things that are moving, I think it's something that is necessary to compete at the global scale. So first, let's say a political agenda that is more valiente, I don't know the word, that really has a vision for Europe, and that this vision is shared, maybe not having everybody happy, and then on the industrial sector, a bigger consolidation as well to be able to play against the big actors in the other regions.
Maybe just a few words on the situation in Spain, that is a little bit different than in France. And also, Pangea raised 23 million last spring concerning investors. Are they more cautious now than maybe a few years ago?
Yes, to continue on what I was saying, and we saw it through the day and how everybody's excited about the ministerial, because at the end of the day, this sector is a sector that, even if it's more and more private, it is driven by public expenditure, and we have to be clear about it. Maybe not our direct client, but the client of our client is. We see it with Copernicus images that are free but not free. So we see it, and national and European budgets are key for the survival and growth of a lot of companies, all the new heritage companies, a lot of companies. So what we see is that different countries have different economies growing at different rates. We saw what happened yesterday in France with the government and the budgetary cuts. In Spain it's a bit different because we have a quite big economic growth. We expect probably it will not double, but it will be 1.5 growth in ISA contribution. So we are all waiting for this to happen, and every 3 years the cards that are shared are different, right? There are countries that grow, others that do not grow, but I think that if we're able to have this European vision, it will be better, and maybe some countries need to do some concessions in some areas. And then talking about investors, I think that there was a first wave of investment up to the bubble in 2021, 2022, with a lot of SPACs in the US. And after that, a lot of investors were very reluctant to look for space investments, because space is a different beast. You need to know to play the political game. You need to know how you win these contracts, being public or private, long lead times, both on the commercial and technical side, so that are not always adapted to the venture capital mindset of 5 years investment and 5 years disinvestment. So we have to be aware that now the investors know more about the specificities of this sector. And I think that this is a good thing, actually, because people before 2021, and even more in the US, maybe was putting money in things that they did not fully understand. And actually, I don't come from the space sector myself, but after 7 years, I think I know a little bit how it works. But it takes time. It takes years to really understand the dynamics of such a sector. And I think that now investors are way more educated and understand way more. So yes, they are more selective, and I think this is a good thing.
Cassie Walling, Constellaire raised 17 million euros 2 years ago, and now plans to complete a Series A funding round in the coming months. Do you observe more pressure to be profitable?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just a couple of words to your point, though, Xavier, about the industry becoming a lot more knowledgeable and a lot more understanding of the complexities of space and investing in space. And I actually think that that's really, really an important point. particularly for a company like us who's moving into looking into dual use and what the implications of that are and what does that mean for us as both a business and an organization working in potentially 2 or multiple different sectors, but also for our investors. And I think the reality is that working with governments, for example, working in defense and intelligence is a very, very different beast also to just working in the commercial market. And I think the sooner investors and broader, let's say, investments and financial flows into the space understands that, I think the better. Because these things do take time. It takes time to build relationships with government. Decisions aren't made just like that. Of course, commercial lead times are still also quite long, but I think with government it's even longer. So I think the sooner the investment cycle reflects and understands the length of cycle in business and government, the better. But coming back to your question, sorry, Florine. Absolutely, I think the pressure to commercialize is already always there as a startup, because 1 in 10 startups is more or less is going to be successful and the rest not. So it always has to be, first and foremost when you're setting up a business. And of course, as soon as you become a VC business model, then the pressure is even higher. The step between maybe seed or pre-seed and then Series A is significant. Of course, there are different metrics. It's not so much about the founding team, it's more about, okay, can this business really fly? Can this team really build a technology that survives its first launch and so on? And then the step from Series A to Series B is even greater, but again, focus very much more on the financials. So the metrics of, is this a business that I want to bet my next, 5-10 years on, or is it not? So absolutely see the pressure changes. We're driving internally to work with different metrics so that our team really understands the change that's required in mindset, but also the change that's required in, let's say, the emphasis that comes from our investors. And of course, that means a translation of just what I said, this shortening of the time, this commercial time that we actually need to see to become profitable. And the pressure is only going to get greater as they get through this next stage gate of Series A, which we're hopefully just about to announce, and then moving on to Series B.
Olivier, Prométhée is also at a turning point in its history, and you are looking to complete the new round of fundraising by the end of the year.
Yes, in the title of the roundtable, it was what will be the new space after 2030, and in a certain way we have a good vision of what we will do after 2030, but the issue is what we do from 2025 until 2030. That's our priority, I think, at this table. In fact, up to now we got what I call guarantee cash, which is a mix of equity, loans, contract. When in fact the money we use, it's around 30 million euro, which is quite a lot of money. But we have to send 20 satellites, what advanced satellite with a global system costs money. And for the rollout of all the constellation, of course, we need more money. And we expect that really in the next months, I would say a number of weeks, I hope we will get the money. What you do in between, I think it's interesting. But of course, you develop solutions, develop AI algorithm, etc. You sell, in fact, your service to get money, to get credibility with the market. You study the market, you test the market. You don't wait just investors, but investors looks, like you say, very carefully. But I would say the question for our company between these rounds, everything is a question of trust. And in fact, I think that the companies, the private sector, have around 90% of the responsibility and in the hand of what we have to do. But national institution Europe has 10% of the responsibility. I would say in amount of money, etc. Because if you don't get the national credibility, the national stamp, and the European stamp, first investors say, it's really important for them, even if you have already a lot of money on your side, to get the round. And the second point, of course, we work, I don't know, it depends when you have export market. I worked in a long time ago for the Rafale. Before the Rafale was the aircraft Rafale available in the base, it was difficult to sell it. Donc the export wanted to secure the fact that the national, your national institution is behind you. And to finish, I would talk about private investors. We talk about all these people in Europe with the investors. Private people put millions on the table with something they don't know very well. I talk about the first layers, of course, not the huge funds. And the fact they expect that their money will grow, and they expect some support also of institutions, of the states, etc. And if we talk about consolidation, we decide, okay, we killed 80% would say, of the player, and it's more disintegration than constellation. Don't forget that all these investors who put money, you won't find them again in the next time. And you need this first brick, because we will continue about innovation, a new player will arrive. But they must find the first amount of money with these investors. So that's also a part of the equation. We have to think about our project, our growth, but also in the future of all the process.
Sébastien Lombard, do you want to add something on public support or private investment?
Regarding the public support, as it was said this morning, there are uncertainties and opportunities. And I would say uncertainties and opportunities. The national budgets, the national public budgets are dependent on the individual economic situation. By luck, it's possible to average that in Europe. And if a country is in a bad situation, perhaps other countries are in a good economic situations. So let's take an example in the US. The request for the budget of the Space Force in 2026 is $40 billion. So we could expect, we don't speak of the same numbers, of course, in Europe, but we could expect that the public budgets are sustained by defense budgets dedicated to space. The opportunity better opportunity is probably this multi-annual financial framework of the European Union. The question is, what is the room for space in this defense and space budget, and what is the room for new space inside this space budget? And of course, it's about surviving up to 2028. Regarding the private investment, well, I think there was the first cycle of investments with probably unrealistic expectations and disappointments. Probably it led to a low point of private investment in 2021, and now it's growing again. But probably private investors are more cautious and are looking for investments backed by public support, especially in security.
Okay, thanks. Cassie Willing, I think you have to go to catch your flight back to Germany. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, and sorry to disturb the panel. Appreciate it.
No, it's okay. Sébastien Lombard, despite all these challenges, do you believe there are new growth drivers for European new space?
It's only my opinion, because every startup will have its own opinion. I think there is an opportunity in the international development of new space. In fact, if you can catch some contracts in some nations with new ambitions in space, nations that try to do their first steps in space, I think new space is especially suitable to help them to do these first steps. So it can concern African continent, can concern Middle East, it can concern Asia, South America, especially in two fields, probably Earth observation and economic intelligence for social and economic development, but also perhaps exploration, since we see countries with ambitions in exploration. Second second point, probably Earth observation on economic intelligence for all. It's classical, so I don't go back on that point. Then defense, security, sovereignty, strategic autonomy are probably the main driver in the next years in Europe, and every startup should keep an eye on that because of the geopolitical context. And perhaps the last one, new space for science. It's not easy to associate science with sometimes very technological payloads on new space, but I think there are opportunities in Earth sciences from space, from low Earth orbit.
Olivier, on these new drivers?
I will rebound on the idea of export. I believe that the trend of country to get, I would say, space sovereignty is very high, even with small country having small experience in space. I like to repeat the fact, I think it's in Africa you got the 26th space agency was created, which is a global African one. So all the country would like to have some means and to have space technology, to master their own space technology. Donc I believe that we have to put our nose abroad. That's the first thing. The second thing, I won't be long, but I explained that in the previous. I believe that security, talk about security, including fight against climatic change and environment, not only pure defense, and all the program in Europe, I think there's a will to get, of course, the big players, historic player, and everybody has to keep his position. We have to stay humble, small companies, but we can be part of the game. And I think there's really a will at the European level to integrate startup and small company in the big pictures. And I suppose that we can, it's also, I think, a domain where we have clear opportunity in the future. Donc I fully agree with you.
Xavier, on this topic?
Yes, I completely agree on internationalization, even if on propulsion it depends on the size of the propulsion system that you do, because sometimes it's export control regulated. I also think, well, at Pangea we are all about cooperation. We think that, and it joins a little bit what I said before, our difference between, the way we see the difference between old space and new space, for me it's not that obvious. It's maybe that we are more able to take risk and they have maybe higher quality standards, but at the end it can be joined. And I think that this is also a leverage for growth, cooperation with other actors to be able to tackle competitive tenders that are bigger, that are complex, and where we can bring things that maybe other players that are bigger cannot bring, and they can bring things that we smaller players cannot bring. And we really see it we are, for instance, in 3 different contracts linked to very high thrust engines, in which we are, some of them working as a prime with very old and established companies like Sapka or Sab, and others in which we are subcontractors to new space companies that are also working in this field. And I think that for us, being a component supplier, because at the end propulsion is only a component, I think this is the road that we must follow. We are not here to decide, we are here to help and facilitate other actors be more cost efficient, quicker, and create revenues and profitability for them.
Maybe one last subject, Sébastien Lombard. It's also difficult to look beyond 2030 because the situation is extremely uncertain in US policy.
I confirm. If you expect that I will answer the question at the end of the conference, I think you're wrong. No, just to focus on one point, Starship. Because Starship is involved in the exploration race between China and the USA. Starship is involved in space transportation and easy access to space, very low cost access to space, super heavy access to space. So the fate of Starship is something of big significance for space in the coming years. And we don't know. There was a success in the 10th trial of Starship, but technical problems are not behind them. If they succeed with Starship, probably they can achieve some their ambitions on the moon. Probably it will be a major rupture for access to low Earth orbit and for the activities that could be performed for the infrastructure that could be put in orbit, and it will be a major triumph, in fact, of new space. SpaceX will demonstrate as a new space player. And when I say that, I'm fully aware that SpaceX is probably the most brilliant example of new space, as well as the most brilliant exception to the new space in the US. But so if they succeed, they will demonstrate a great capability to access to space. It will probably change the activities that we will perform after 2030. If they fail, and even if they don't fail, China will probably win the race to the moon, and it will be a big game changer in the space sector. Probably it will not be very nice for the new space that SpaceX is responsible for losing the moon race, but China will probably take over the leadership in the space sector for exploration and perhaps on other segments of space activity. And in this case, the question is what will be the next move of the US to answer the victory of China on the moon? Who knows?
We have come to the end of this session. Thank you again to all four of you for your participation.